The N word meaning black, I will just say black person. If it's an N word that needs to show the context, I will just say the N word from here on out. Forgive me, this is a book very, very has me thinking a lot. So this is a a good place to grow and stretch. All right, let's get started with the 5 people in here. Welcome. Anybody who's willing to participate would be great. More participation, the better. Black Jacobin. What was the intellectual level of these slaves? The planters, hating them, called them by every opprobrious name, which we have right here. Let's look up that word. Effects. There you go. Is an adjective describing language or conduct that is severely critical, scornful, or shameful. Shameful, huh? All right. The black peoples, it says the N-word, says a memoir published in 1789, quote, are unjust, cruel, barbarous, half-human, treacherous, deceitful, thieves, drunkards, proud, the L word, unclean, shameless, jealous of fury, and cowards, end quote. It was by sentiments such as these that they strove to justify the abominable cruelties they practiced. And they took great pains that that black people should remain the brute beast they wanted him to be. Quote, the safety of the whites demand that we keep black people in the most profound ignorance. We have reached the stage of believing firmly that one must treat black people as one treats beasts, end quote. Such is the opinion of the governor of Martinique in the letter addressed to the minister, and such was the opinion of all colonists, except for Jewish people, who spared no energy in making Israelites of their slaves. The majority of the colonists rigorously kept all instructions, religious and
Religiously.
otherwise. Oh yeah, religiously kept all instruction, religions and otherwise away from the slaves. Naturally, there were all types of men among them, ranging from native chieftains, as was the father of Toussaint Louverture, to men who had been slaves in their own country. The Creole black person was more docile than the slave who had been born in Africa. Some said he was more intelligent. Others doubted that there was much difference though the Creole slave knew the language and was more familiar with his surroundings and his work. Yet those who took the trouble to observe them away from their masters and in their intercourse with each other did not fail to see that remarkable liveliness of intellect and vivacity. What is that word? Vivacity. 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 I don't know how to say this word. Let's go look it up.
Vivacity.
Let's go look it up. Vivacity. But let's find out what it means. Vivacity. Vivacity. It's going to be a lot of. No, don't do that. Why'd you do that? It's not cooperating. Vivacity. 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 Of course it. All right. Vivacity is the quality of being lively, um, ina- inanimated, spirited, and full of energy, often used to describe a charm or enthusiastic personality. Okay.
Don't forget when it says West Indies, it's Caribbean.
Uh huh. All right. Hold on. I'm doing this real quick. Okay. All right. Let's get back to it. So, vivacity of spirit, which which so distinguish their descendants from the Caribbean today. Further, Turtre, who knew them well, noted their secret pride and feelings of superiority to their masters, the difference between their behavior before their master and when they were by themselves. D. Wimpfen, an exceptionally observant and able traveler, was also astonished at this dual personality of the slaves. The dual personality, yeah, okay. One was to hear with that warm and what, oh my gosh, volubility, oh my gosh, another word, bring back. Okay, it's viability. What viability, and at the same time, with that precious um, precision of ideas and accuracy of judgment, this character, this character, heavy and oh my gosh, tac tacturn,
Turn.
oh my gosh, what
Uh,
what?
tack turn. Tack turn.
Okay, let's go look that one up now. It's taciturn. These words, taciturn. All right, let's look up taciturn. All right, taciturn. A person who is habitually reserved, quiet, and uncommunicative in speech. Okay. All right. Taciturns. This book's going to stretch me out. All day, now squatting before his fire, tells stories, talks, gesticulate, gesticulates, argues, passes opinion, approves of, condemns both his master and everyone who surrounds him. It was this intelligence which refused to be crushed, these latent possibilities, the frightened that frightened the colonists as it frightened the whites in Africa today. Quote, no species of men has more intelligence, end quote, wrote Hilliard, oh my gosh, Del Albertulu, a colonist in 1784, and had his book banned. But one does not need education or encouragement to cherish a dream of freedom. At their midnight celebration of voodoo, their African cult, they danced and sang, usually these favorite songs: A Bamba, Hugh Hugh, Kanga Mbafio T, Kanga Mandili, Kanga Do Kakala, Kanga La. So that's, yeah. Quote, I swear to destroy the whites and all that they possess. Let us die rather than fail to keep this vow. I guess that's what it means. The colonists knew this song and tried to stamp it out, and the voodoo cult with which it was linked. In vain. For over 200 years, the slaves sang it at their meetings, as the Jewish people in Babylon sang a Zion, and the Bantu today sings the national anthem of Africa. All the slaves, however, did not undergo this regime. There was a small privileged caste, the foremen of the gangs, coachmen, cooks, butlers, maids, nurses, female companions, and other house servants. These repaid their kind treatment and comparatively easy life with a strong attachment to their master. And have thus enabled historians. Um, Regus professor. Is it Regis? I
I
don't
don't
know
know.
that word. Let me find out what this word is. A rebellion. I'm stretching myself up with this literary text. Oh my god, that took forever. It's red US. All right, and it means let me find it. Got it. Effects. Got it. Which means royal, kingly, or belonging to a king. Okay. Find it again. I know this is like taking forever to read, but it's okay. It doesn't matter. Okay. Professors and um, sentimentalists to present plantation slavery as a patriarchal relations between master and slave, permeated with the vices of their masters and mistresses. These upper servants gave themselves air and despised the slaves in the field, dressed in cast-off silks and brocades. They gave balls in which, like trained animals, they danced minutes and quadrilles, and bowed the crust-eyed in the fashion of Versailles. Oh my gosh! But a
Bowed and
few of
curtsied
these
in the fashion of
what
Versailles. Bowed and
Versailles.
curtsied in the fashion of Versailles.
Okay, thank you. But a few of these used their position to cultivate themselves, to gain a little education, to learn all they could. The leaders of the revolution are usually those who have been able to profit by the cultural advantages of the system they are attacking. And the San Domingo Revolution was no exception to this rule. Chris, Christophe, um, afterwards Emperor of Haiti, was a slave, a waiter in a public hotel at Cap Franciscus, where he made use of his opportunities to gain a knowledge of men and of the world. Toussaint Louverture also belonged to this small and privileged caste. His father, son of a petty chieftain in Africa, was captured in war, sold as a slave, and made the journey in the slave ship. He was brought by the colonists of some sensibility who, recognizing that this black person was an unusual person, allowing him allowing him a certain liberties on the plantation and the use of 5 slaves to cultivate a plot of land. He became a Catholic. He became a Catholic, married a woman who was both beautiful and good, and Toussaint was the eldest of 8 children. Of his 8 children, near to the household lived an old black person, Pierre Bastiste, remarkable for his integrity of character and a smattering of knowledge. This black person spoke a debased French known as Creole, but Pierre knew French, also a little Latin and a little geometry, which he had learned from a missionary. Pierre Bastille became Toussaint's godfather and taught his godson the rudiments of French, using the services of the Catholic Church. He instructed him also in the rudiments of Latin. Toussaint learned also to draw. The young slaves had the care of the flocks and the herds, and this was Toussaint's earlier occupation. But his father, like many other Africans, had some knowledge of med, medical, no, it's not medical,
Medicinal.
med, medicinal plants, sorry, medicinal plants, and taught Toussaint what he knew. The elements of an education, his knowledge of herbs, his unusual intelligence, singled him out, and he was made coachman to his master. This brought him further means of comfort and self-education. Ultimately, he was made steward of all the livestock on the estate, a responsible post, which was usually held by white men. If Toussaint's genius came from where genius comes, yet circumstances conspired to give him exceptional parents and friends and a kind master. But the number of slaves who occupied positions with such opportunities was infinitely small in comparison with the hundreds of thousands who bore on their bent backs the whole structure of San Domingo society. All of them did not submit to it. Those whose boldness of spirit found slavery intolerable and refused to evade it by committing suicide would fly to the woods and mountains and form bands of free men and maroons. This fortified their fastnesses with palisades
Palisades, yeah.
and ditches. Women followed them. They reproduced themselves, and for 100 years before 1989, the Maroons were a source of danger to the colony. In 1720, 1,000 slaves fled to the mountains. In 1751, there were at least 3,000 of them. Usually they formed separate bands, but periodically they found a chief who was strong enough to unite the different sections. Many of these rebels leaders struck terror into the hearts of the colonists by their raids on the plantation, and the strength and determination of the resistance they organized against attempts to exterminate them. The greatest of these chiefs was Macadal. Please put the name in the thing. I appreciate that. He convinced the bold design of uniting all black people and driving the whites out of the colony. He was a black person from Guinea who had been a slave in the district of Lambe, Limbe, later to become one of the greatest sentries of the revolution. Macadal was an orator in the opinion of a white contemporary, equal to in equivalence to the European orators of the day, and different only in his superior strength and vigor. He was fearless, and though one-handed from an accident, had a fortitude of spirit which he knew how to preserve in the midst of the most cruel tortures. He claimed to predict the future, like Mohammed. He had revelations. He persuaded his followers that he was immortal and exercised such a hold over them that they considered it an honor to serve him on their knees. The handsomest woman fought for the privilege of being admitted to his bed. Not only did his band raid and pillage plantations far and wide, but he himself ranged from plantation to plantation and make converts, stimulate his followers, and perfect his great plan for the destruction of white civilization in San Domingo. Uninstructed mass, feeling its way to revolution, usually begins by terrorism, and Macadal aimed at delivering his people by means of poison. For 6 years he built up his organization, and he and his followers poisoned not only whites, but disobedient members of their own band. Then he arranged that on the particular day, the water of every house in the capital of the province was to be poisoned, and the general attack made on the whites while they were in the convulsions of anguish and death. He had he had lists of all members of his party in each slave gang, appointing captains, lieutenants, and other officers, arranging for bands of black people to leave the town and spread over the plans to massacre the whites. His temerity temerity was the we're going to look up that word was the cause of his downfall. We're going to look up temerity real quick. Assalamu alaikum. Proud of me, I said it correctly. Temerity. Add. Is unreasonable rash, a foolish boldness often exhibited, a reckless contempt for danger, rules, or proper respect. All right. Wrong one. This one. Where the heck? Where's the other one? Oh, there's two. There it is. I'm gonna have to do another picture soon. His temerity was the cause of his downfall. He went one day to a plantation, got drunk, and was betrayed, and being captured, was burnt alive. Damn. Macadel rebellion never reached fruition, and it was the only hint of an organized attempt at revolt during the 100 years preceding the French Revolution. The slaves seemed internally resigned, though here and there a slave was, oh my gosh, manumitted or purchased his freedom from his owner. From there, masters came to talk to future emancipations. The San Domingo colonists said that slavery was necessary, and for them, that finished the argument. Legislation passed for the protection of the slaves remaining on paper in face of the dictum that a man could do as he liked with his own. All laws, however just and humane they may be, in favor of black people, will always be a violation of the rights of property if they are not sponsored by a colonist. All laws on property are just only if they are supported by the opinion of those who are interested in them as proprietors. This was still white opinion at the beginning of the French Revolution. Not only planters, but officials made it quite clear that wherever the penalties for the ill treatment of slaves, these could never be enforced. The slaves might understand that they had rights which would be fatal to the peace and well-being of the colony. That was why the colonists never hesitated at the mutilation, the torture, or the murder of a slave who had cost him thousands of francs. Quote, the Ivory Coast the Ivory Coast is a good mother, end quote, was the colonial proverb. Slaves could always be bought, and profit were always high. The Black Code was enacted in 1685, a century after 1788. The La June case laid bare the realities of slave law and slave justice in San Domingo. Lejeune was a coffee planter of, oh my gosh, Palacinus. So I think that's a place. Let me go find out.
It
We're gonna
is
go
a
find
place.
out. Let's find out. You're right. I'm gonna find out. It's like Pleasance suspected that the mortality among his black people, they used, of course, was due to poison. He murdered 4 of them and attempted to extort confessions from 2 women by torture. He roasted their feet, legs, and elbows, while alternately gagging them thoroughly and then withdrawing the gag. He extorted nothing and treated all his French-speaking slaves that he would kill them without mercy if they dared to denounce him. Like Palance, in a thickly populated North Providence, was always the center of more advanced slaves, and 14 of them went to La Cap and charged La Jeune before the law. The judges could do no less than accept the charges. They appointed a commission which made an investigation on La Jeune's plantation and confirmed the testimony of the slaves. The commission actually found the 2 women barred and chained, with elbows and legs decomposing, but still alive. One of them had her neck so lacerated by the iron collar that she could not swallow. La Jeune insisted that they were guilty of the poisoning which for a long time had ravaged his plantation, and gave in evidence in a evidence box taken in the woman's possession. This, he said, contained poison, but when the box was opened, it was found to contain nothing more than ordinary tobacco and rat dung. Defense was impossible, and when the 2 women died, La Jeune disappeared just in time to escape the arrest. The case was clear. At the preliminary hearing, the 14 black people repeated their accusation, word for word. 7 white witnesses testified in favor of La Jeune, and 2 of his stalwart formally absolved him from all guilt of La Jeune, and demanded that each of his slaves be given 50 lashes for having denounced him. The Chamber of Agriculture, the La Cap, asked that La Jeune should merely be banished from the colony. 70 planters from the North made a similar petition, and the Philadelphian Circle, a center of San Domingo culture, was asked to make representation on La Jeune's behalf. La Jeune's father asked for a right of intervention against one of the official investigators whose evidence he impinged. Quote, to put it shortly, wrote the governor and the attendant to the minister. Quote, it seems that the safety of the colony depends on the acquittal of La Jeune. End quote. It did, if the slaves were to be kept in their place. The judges, after a thousand delays, returned a negative verdict. The charges were declared null and void, and the case dismissed. The public prosecutor demanded an appeal before the Superior Council of Port-au-Prince, the official capital of the island. All white Santo Domingo was up in arms. The intendant appointed the oldest member of the council to be the rapporteur, thinking that he could depend upon to ensure justice. But one day, on the day of the trial, fearing that he would not be able to secure a conviction, he absent himself, and the council once more acquitted La Jeune. The home governor could pass what laws it liked. White Santo Domingo would not tolerate any interference with the methods by which they kept their slaves in order. This was the problem to be solved. Hope from the planters, there was none. In France, liberalism was still an aspiration and a trusteeship. Its fig leaf was as yet known, but on the tide of humanitarianism rising on the bourgeoisie revolt against feudalism, Del Torat and a encyclopedist had attacked slavery. Quote, let the colonies be destroyed rather than be the cause of so much evil, end quote, said the encyclopedia in its article on the slave trade. but such outbursts neither then nor now have carried weight, and wordy attacks against slavery drew sneers from observers which were not altogether undeserved. The authors were compared to doctors who offered to the patient nothing more than invectives against the disease which consumed him. But among these literary opponents of slavery was one who, 9 years before the fall of the Bastille, called boldly for the slave revolution with a passionate conviction that it was bound to come some day and relieve Africa and Africans. He was a priest, the Abbé Raynal, and he preached his revolutionary doctrine in the philosophical and political history of the establishment of and commerce of the Europeans in the two Caribbeans. It was a famous book in its time, and it came into the hands of the slave most fitted to make use of it, Toussaint Louverture. Natural liberty, quote, natural liberty is the right which nature has given to everyone to dispose of himself according to his will. Another quote, the slave, an instrument in the hands of the wickedness, is below the dog which the Spaniard lets loose against the American. Another quote, these are memorable and eternal truths. The foundation of all mortality, the basis of all government, will they be contested? Yes. And the most famous passage, I got a warning violation. Turn off your camera. I didn't turn off my camera. The most famous passage, quote, if self-interest alone prevails with nations and their masters, there is another power. Nature speaks in louder tones than philosophy or self-interest. Already are the established two colonies to fugitive black people whom treaties and power protect from assault. Those lightnings announce the thunder. A courageous chief only is wanted. Where is he, the great man whom nature owes to her vexed, oppressed, and tormented children? Where is he? He will appear. Doubt it not. He will come forth and raise a sacred standard of liberty. This venerable signal will gather around him the companions of his misfortune, more impetuous than the torrent that will for everywhere leave an indelible.
Yes,
Huh? What?
yes.
I didn't hear what you said.
You were right. Indelible.
Okay. Indelible trace of their just resentment. Everywhere people will bless the name of the hero who shall be reestablished the rights of the human race. Everywhere will they raise trophies in his honor. Over and over again, Toussaint read this passage. Quote, a courageous chief only is wanted. Where is he? End quote. A courageous chief was wanted. It is the tragedy of mass movements that they need and can only to rarely find adequate leadership. But much else was wanted. Men make their own history, and the Black Jacobins of Santo Domingo were to make history which would alter the fate of millions of men and shift the economic current of 3 continents. But if they could seize opportunity, they could not create it. The slave trade and slavery were woven tight into economics of the 18th century. Three forces, the proprietors of Santo Domingo, the French bourgeoisie, and the British bourgeoisie, throve throve on his devastation on the continent and on the brutal exploitation of millions. As long as these maintain an equilibrium, the infernal traffic would go on, and for that matter would have gone on until the present day. But nothing, however profitable, goes on forever. From the very momentum of their own development, colonial planters, French and British bourgeoisie, were generating internal stresses and intensifying internal rivalries, moving blindly to explosion and conflicts, which would shatter the basis of their dominance and create the possibility for emancipation. So they're creating tons of crises and stuff like this, even amongst themselves, because competition does that too. Long time no speak. Hope you're well. I'm doing all right. Good to see you. All right. Does anybody have any questions? No questions? Okay. Let's move on. Oh, that was it. That was the last of that chapter. So what did we learn from that chapter? That a whole bunch of, they went into details about how they shipped them here. They went into details about how people were engaging and how they were not allowing children to come into fruition. They talked about people leaving, how they gathered, how one came to fruition, but at the end he was, burned alive. So now we're talking about, like, Toussaint finding ways and motivation to maybe even start something. So we went over the property, and the property were the people. Property were the people. So now I guess we're in the chapter 2, the owners. All right. So I have to reread this book again, which I'm going to do that. So my first go around is nothing but learning. Nothing but learning. That's all it is. Nothing but learning. We're learning together. And the more people that come into the chat and actually engage with me, the more we can learn. 2, the owners. Chapter 2. Of the 3 Santo Domingo planters, British bourgeoisie, the French bourgeoisie. Yes. The first and most important were the planters of San Domingo. On such soil of San Domingo, slavery, only a vicious society, could flourish, nor were the incidental circumstances such as to mitigate the demoralization inherited in such a method of production. San Domingo is an island of mountain ranges, raising in places to 6,000 feet above sea level. From these flow innumerable streams, coalescing into rivers, which water the valleys, and not unconsiderable plains lying between the hills. This distance from the equator gives an unusual, lusciousness. What's that word?
Lusciousness.
Lusciousness. I'm gonna go find out what that word means.
It's lusciousness.
Lusciousness, you said? And variety. To the natural exuberance of the tropics and the artificial vegetation was not inferior to the natural. Fields upon fields, the light green sugarcane, low and continual ripple in the breeze, enclosed the factory and the dwelling houses like a sea. A few feet above the cane stalks waved the 5-foot leaves of the banana trees. Near the dwelling houses, the branches of the palm, crowning a perfectly rounded and leafless column of 60 to 70 feet, gave forth, like huge feathers, a continuous soothing murmur, while groups of them in the distance, always visible in the unclouded tropical air, looked like clusters of giant umbrellas waiting for the parched and sun-baked travelers. In the season, mango and orange trees, solitaire or in the groves, were a mass of green leaves and red or golden fruit. Thousands of small, scrupulously tidy coffee trees rose on the slope of the hills, and the abrupt and precipitous mountainside were covered to the summits with the uh, luxuriant tropical undergrowth, and precious hardwood forests of San Domingo. The traveler from Europe was enchanted at his first glimpse of this paradise, in which the ordered beauty of agriculture and prodigality, prodigality, I can't say it, prodigal, I don't know that word. Look up that word too. Prodigality of nature completely equally for his surprise and admiration. But it was the mono,
Monotonous.
mono, monotonous, yeah. But it was monotonous. Year in, year out, day after day, it was the same, a little greener in the wet season, a little browner in the dry. The wild, the wilder, the wilder scenery was constantly magnificent, but the colonist, who had seen the same domestic landscape from his earliest hours, it awakened little response. To the immigrant who was the first charmed, who was at first charmed and exhilarated, uh, monotony. What's that word?
Monotonous.
Monotony. I can't say it right. Bred indifferences, which could develop into active dislike and longing for the seasoned return with the year. The climate was harsh, and for the Europeans of the 18th century, without modern knowledge of tropic hygiene, almost intolerable. The burning sun and the humid atmosphere took heavy toll on all newcomers, European and African alike. The African the African died, but the European ailments were dread by the planters, whose knowledge and habits were powerless to combat them. Fever and dysentery in the hot season, cold, what's that word?
Rheumatism.
Are you getting mad? I hope you're not getting mad at me. Rheumatism, nasal, catars, catars, catars. I don't know that word. Hold on a second. Look this word. It was Qatar. I sent you a message. Did you get it?
Yeah.
All right. An inflammation of okay, of oh my gosh, why am I having hard times? Why is the words killing me? Mucosis membranes in the nose and throat,
Mucus.
causing a thank you, mucus membranes in the nose and throat, causing a thick buildup of mucus, often described as why
Phlegm.
phlegm. Jesus, I'm having a hard day today. Okay, there's the first, there's the second. Okay, and diarrhea in the wet. All times oh my gosh, the disinclination for sustained labor fostered by a gluttony of what is this word?
Lasciviousness.
Lasciviousness bred by the abundance of and scores of slaves waiting to perform any duty from pulling off shoes to spending the night. Indulgence had the white colony in its grips from childhood. Quote, I want an egg, said the colonial child. There are none. Then I want two. This notorious antidote. Is that right?
Yes.
That's not, is that antidote? That's not antidote. Is it? There's no way.
Anecdote.
And do you mind if I just double check for myself?
That's fine. Go.
God.
I think the difference is, Drew, you're trying to say antidote, and it's
It's
anecdote,
anecdote, not
which
antidote.
is
It's
what I
anecdote.
said.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I was hearing you wrong. It's for myself. That was for myself. It's anecdote was characteristics. All right. To the unhealthiness of the climate and the indulgence of every wish were added the open, oh my gosh. I gotta look at this word too. I
45.
got,
Oh, sorry.
it's licentiousness. It's like, and habitual ferocity of his parents, and the degradation of human life which surrounded the child on every side. The ignorance, the ignorance inherited in rural life prior to the Industrial Revolution was reinforced by the, oh my gosh, by the gotta look up this word. It's like every other word I have to look up. Every other word. I swear. It's irascibility. Irascibility and the conceit of isolation allied to the indisputed domination over hundreds of human beings. The plantation
Honey,
were
I was gonna say
what?
it's a lot of SAT words today.
Yes. The plantations were often miles apart, and in those days, the horse traffic and few or bad roads in the mountainous country, communication with neighbors was difficult and rare. The planters hated the life and sought only to make enough money to retire to France, or at least spend a few months in Paris, luxurianting in the amenities of civilization, with so much to eat and drink. There was a lavish hospitality which has remained a tradition, but the majority of the great houses, contrary to the legend, were poorly furnished, and their owners looked at them as rest houses in the interval of trips to Paris, seeking to overcome their abundant leisure and boredom with food, drink, dice, and black women. They had long before 1989 lost the simplicity of life and rude energy of those nameless men who laid the foundation of the colony. The manager of an overseer, the more intelligent of their slaves were more than sufficient to run their plantation. As soon as they could afford it, they left the island, if possible, never to return, though they never formed in France so rich a powerful of social and political force as the West Caribbean interest in England. The women were subjected to the same evil influences. In the earlier years of the colony, they had been imported like slaves and machinery. Most of the first arrivals were the sweepings of the Paris gutter, bringing to the island, quote, bodies of corrupt as their manner, and serving only to infect the colony. Other officials asked for women, begged the authorities not to send the, quote, ugliest they could find in the hospital, end quote. As late as 1743, official San Domingo was complaining that France still sent girls whose, quote, aptitude for generations was for the most part destroyed by their by too great usage. In projects for some educational systems never came to fruition. With increasing wealth, the daughters of the richer planters went to Paris, where, after a year or two at the finishing schools, they made distinguished matches with the impoverished French nobility. But in the colony, they passed their time, oh my gosh, attiring themselves, singing unintelligent songs, and listening to the gossip and, oh my gosh, the adulation of their slaves' attendants. Passion was their chief occupation, stimulated by overfeeding, idleness, and an undying jealousy of the black and half-black, half-white women who competed so successfully for the favors of their handsomes, husbands, and lovers. To the men of diverse races, classes, and types who formed the earlier population of San Domingo had been added as the years passed a more unified and cohesive element, the offshoots of the French aristocracy, deprived of political power by Richelieu, converted by Louis, I gotta do this one, the 14th, into a decorative and administrative appendage of absolute monarchy. The younger son of a French nobleman found in Santo Domingo some opportunity to rebuild their shattered fortunes, and live the life of the country magnate now denied them in France. They came as officers in the army and officials, and stayed to found fortunes in families. They commanded the militia, administered a rude justice, arrogant and spendthrift. Yet they were a valuable section of white Santo Domingo society, knit together more firmly. It's just what?
It's San Domingo.
Okay. Society, and knit together more firmly a society composed of such diverse and disintegrating elements. But even their education, traditions, and pride were not proof against the prevailing corruption, and one could see a relations of the Del Vandrils, of, oh my gosh, the Chatanafi, or the Bicacats, last descendants of the famous Marshal of France, passing his life between the bowl of rum and a black concubine. Town life is the nurse of civilization, but part of the Port-au-Prince, the capital of Cap Franciscos, I can't say it, Franciscos, the towns of San Domingo, at the height of its prosperity, were little more than villages. In 1789, Saint Mark had only 150 houses. Mole Saint Nicholas, the Gibraltar of the Caribbean Sea, had only 250. Leongan, one of the most important towns of the West Province, consisted of between 300 to 400 houses laid out in 15 streets. Jacmel, one of the key towns in the south, had only 40. Even Cap Francisco, the Paris of the Antilles, and the entrepot of the European trade, had a population of only 20,000, of whom half were slaves. Yet La Cap was, as it was familiarly called, was a town famous in its time and in its way unique. The incessant activity reigned there, with its harbor always filled with ships and its streets with merchandise. But it too bore an imprint of savagery which seemed inseparable from everything connected with San Domingo. One of the most distinguishing colonial historians, Maru of Saint Mary, Mary, admits that the streets were sewers and the people threw all their garbage into them. The government begged people to, in vain, not to commit nuances, not what is it? Nuisance in the street, to be careful of the disposition of, oh my gosh, fecal matter, not to let sheep, pigs, and goats wander loose. No one paid attention to these injunctions. In Port-au-Prince, the official capital of the colony, the population washed their dirty linen, made indigo, and soaked. What's that?
Minoic, but I don't know what it is.
What is a Minoic? This is fun, 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 everybody.
Could be manioc. I don't know that. I don't know that word.
If you gotta look stuff up, go for it. I don't. Okay, thank you. That's quite right. Manioc. Let's find out what manioc is. It's not a hard book. This is very, very making me not comfortable, which is good. It's stretching me. Manioc. Looks like it is a woody shrub from South Africa. Oh, South America, cultivated for its large, starchy, edible. Okay, for its root, so it's food. Okay, awesome, awesome, awesome. All right. Kavasa, is that what it is? Okay. In the water of the only spring which supplied the town. Despite repeating prohibitions, they continued to beat their slaves in the public streets, nor were the authorities themselves more careful. If it rained at night, one could not walk in the town. The next day, the streams of water filled the ditches at the side of the street, in which one could hear the croaking of toads. Gee, I wonder if we hear that here where we're at. Wimpfen called Port-au-Prince a Tartar camp, and Moreau de Saint Mary himself a colonial depreciates. What's that word? Deprecates.
I don't know.
This is fun, everybody. Jesus Christ.
It's deprecates. It took me a minute.
Damn it, deprecates. Deprecates the sharpness of the expression, but admits that it was not entirely implacable. No, inapplicable. Inapplicable, right? Yeah. Such culture as there was centered on these towns. In La Cap, there were various mosaic and other societies, of the most famous in which was the Philadelphia Circle, a body devoting itself to politics, philosophy, and literature. But the chief reading of the population consists of lavish. Whoa, what is this word?
I think we did this one already.
I know we did. I forgot. Be right back. Not getting a lot. Lascivious. Jesus Christ. Lascivious novels. For amusement, there were theaters not only in La Camp and Port-au-Prince, but in such small towns as Lyon and Saint Mark, where the oh my gosh, the melodramas and the thrillers of the day were played to packed houses. In 1787, there were three companies in Port-au-Prince alone. What the towns lacked in intellectual fare, they made up for opportunities of, oh my gosh, debauchery, gambling dens, for everyone in San Domingo. Played the great fortunes were won and lost in a few days. Dance halls and private brothels, there whereby the mixed women lived in. They used the M word, everybody.
Biracial.
Biracial woman, thank you. Biracial woman lived in, when I say biracial, it's half black, half white, and they use the M word, okay? Women lived in such comfort and luxury that in 1789, of 7,000 biracial women in Santo Domingo, 5,000 were either prostitutes or kept mistresses of white men. The regular clergy of San Domingo, instead of being a moderating influence, were notorious for their intervenience, the irreverence, and uh, degeneracy. In the earlier years, they consisted chiefly of unfrocked monks. Later came a better class of priests, but in that turgid, overheated society, few were able to withstand the temptations of easy money, easy living, easy women. Many of them lived openly with their concubines. Their greed for money led them to exploit black people with the same ruthlessness as the rest of white San Domingo. About the middle of the 18th century, one of them used to baptize the same black person 7 or 8 times for the ceremony amused the slaves, and they were willing to pay a small sum for each baptism. As late as 1790, another was competing with black people. Oh my gosh, here we go. OBEAH men for the coppers.
Mm.
What? You mumble. Don't mumble. Tell me what it is.
Oberman.
Oberman for the copper of the slaves by selling charms against illness and talismans to ensure the success of their petty ventures. In the towns, the great merchants and the wealthy agents of the maritime bourgeoisie were included with the planters as big whites. On the plantation, the managers and the stewards were either agents of the absentee owners or were under the eye of the planter himself and therefore subordinate to him. In this these in the country and in the towns, the small lawyers, the notaries, the clerks, the artisans, the grocers were known as the small whites. Including among the small whites was a crowd of city vagabonds. Am I allowed to say that?
I
Fugitives.
think so. It's about white people.
Okay, well, for justice, escaping galley slaves, debitors, unable to pay their bills, adventurers seeking adventure for quick fortune, men of all crimes and all nationalities. From the underworld and two continents they came, Frenchmen and Spaniards, Maltese, Italians, Portuguese, and Americans. For whatever a man for whatever a man's origin, record of or character, here is white-skinned man made him a person of quality and rejected, or failures in their own country flocked to San Domingo, where consideration was achieved at so cheap a price, money flowed, and opportunities and debauchery abounded. Abounded. God. No small white was a servant. No white man did any work that he could get a black person to do for him. A barber summoned to attend to a customer appeared in a silk attire, hat under his arm, sword at his side, cane under his elbow, followed by 4 black people. One of them combed the hair, another dressed it, the third curled it, and the fourth finished. While they worked, the employer presided over the various operations. At the slightest slackness, at the slightest mistake, he boxed the cheek of the unfortunate slave so hard that often he knocked him over. The slave picked himself up without any sign of resentment and resumed. The same hand which had knocked over the slave closed on the enormous fee, and the barber took his exit with the same insolence and elegance as before. This was the type of woman of whom race prejudice was more important than even the possession of slaves, of which they held few. The distinction between a white man and a man of color was for them fundamentally. It was their all. In defiance of it, they would bring down the whole of the world. Big whites and small whites did not exhaust the white population of San Domingo. Over them both was a bureaucracy composed almost entirely of Frenchmen from who governed the island. The head of the bureaucracy were the governors and the intendant. The governor was the official representative of the king. With all of this implies even to this day in the administration of distant colonies. His official salary might be as much as 100,000 livres, livres, a year, beside the profits common to such posts in the 20th as well as the 18th century, the 12th as well as the 18th century. The granting of concessions, the act on the quiet as agent for European merchandise in the colonies and for the colonial merchandise in Europe. The French nobleman was as greedy as the governorship of San Domingo as his British counterparts for the viceroyalty of India. In 1787, the governor was a brother up to the French ambassador in London. He left the post of governor to become Minister of Marine. Next to the governor was the intendant, who was responsible for justice, finance, and general administration, and sometimes drew a salary of 80,000 livres a year. It's livres. The governor was a soldier, an aristocrat. The attendant was a bureaucrat, and the military and the civil more constantly a variance. But against the local whites, they and their staffs, the commandants in the districts, the senior officials represent the king's authority and the commercial privileges of the French bourgeoisie. They could arrest without warrant. They could refuse to carry out the instructions of the minister. They could force the members of local advisory councils to resign, could grant favors, pronounce confiscations, increase taxes. In fact, their arbitrariness had no legal bounds. God was too high and the king too far. The colonialists hated them. In addition to their absolute power, they were wasteful and extravagant. Their, oh my gosh, malversation. What's that? Can you say it? You know it? Were constant and enormous. We're gonna look at that word again.
Malversations, but I don't know what it means.
We're gonna find out. Hey, Mr. Carrot. conversation, according to the person. Remember what they asked the question about? Is the corrupt, fraudulent, or improper behavior of public official or okay? So we got it. Okay, where's that's the first? There's the second. Okay, all right. They said LAV. Yeah, I think that's right. Malversation were constant and enormous, and they treated the local whites with the arrogance of super. Oh my gosh, super. Oh my gosh, silorousness. I can't even say this word. This guy likes to use big words. This person. I'll right back. It's superciliousness, which means a person who expresses that is haughtily disdainful, arrogant, and contemptuous, act as though they are superior to others. Okay. 1 and 2. All right. Are we having fun yet? Me going back and forth? Serviliousness that geld these little, oh my gosh, potantan, oh my gosh, another word. Jesus Christ. His descriptions are just completely intellectual. You know, it makes it a little bit like this word, potentates, with their 200 or 300 slaves. There were there were good and bad governors, good and bad intendants, as there were good and bad slave owners. But really, but this was a matter of pure chance. It was a system that was bad. There was some pretense at local self-government, both at Le Cap and at Port-au-Prince, where there were local councils which registered the royal edicts and the decisions of the local government. Shortly before the revolution, there was also appointed a council of the richest and most powerful of the whites who were supposed to represent local opinion. But the attendant, like the governor in the British Legislative Council and of today, could accept or reject their advice as he pleased. The bureaucracy, with the source of its power, so many thousands of miles away, could not depend only on the 2 French regiments in the colony. In 1789, the functionaries of San Domingo, where the white population was about 30,000 members, only 513. Without some mass support, government would have been impossible. Bringing them from France to the traditional hostilities of the absolute monarchy to the political power of the feudal nobility, the bureaucrats sought a counterweight to the power of the planters in the small whites of the town and country. The chief complaint of the small whites was against the militia, which policed the districts and frequently encroached on the attendant's administration of justice and finance. To these complaints, the intendant was always sympathetic. In 1760, one intendant went so far as to dissolve the militia altogether and appoint syndics to carry on local government. The colony was thrown into disorder. The home government was reestablished, the militia, and restored its former powers to the military. Straightway, an insurrection broke out in the island, led by the local justice of peace, lawyers, notaries, and prosecutors. The planters complained that the supporters of this rebellion were the lowest sections of the population. In one district, 3 Portuguese Jewish people, a notary, a steward, a tailor, a shopmaker, a butcher, assistant, and a former soldier of the ranks. The scorn of the planters is overwhelming for, quote, these rascals who have occasioned these troubles, and whom we can say with justice that they are the vilest canaille whose father and mothers have been lackeys or domestic servants, or even of an origin of still lower. It was not their low origins which justified the attack of the planters upon the small whites. Tailors, butchers, and soldiers from the ranks were to play the decisive part in the French Revolution, and by their spontaneous efforts save Paris from the counter-revolution at home and abroad. But most of the small whites were a rabble and filled no important function in the economy of the colony. If every single one of them had been deported from the country, such work as they did could have been done by free biracial people, free black people, and even slaves. They were not an integral part in San Domingo's society. Either they functioned, birth or traditions, but they were white, and as such of use to the bureaucracy. In 1771, we find the intendant again complaining of military tyranny. Quote, since the militia are reestablished, he complains, the officers are every day depriving the ordinary judges of all their, oh my gosh, prerogatives?
Yes.
Oh my God, I got it. Here then was the first great division, that between great whites and small whites, with the bureaucracy balancing between and encouraging the small whites, nothing could assuage or solve this conflict. The moment the revolution begins in France, these two will spring at each other and fight to the finish. There is another class of free men in Santo Domingo, the free biracial people and free black people. Neither legislation nor the growth of race prejudice could destroy the attractions of the black woman for the white man of Santo Domingo. It was characteristics of all classes. The rabble on the shore front, the planters or overseer who chose a slave to pass the night with him and drove her from his bed to the lash of the slave driver next morning. A governor of the colony, newly arrived from France, who was disturbed at finding himself seized with a passion for a handsomest of his 4 black maids. Ew. In the earlier days, biracial people was free up to the age 24, not by law, but because white men were so few and in comparison with the slaves, that the masters sought to bind these intermediates to themselves rather than to let them swell the ranks of their enemies. In those early years, race prejudice was not strong. The Black Code in 1685 authorized marriage between the white and the slave who had children by him, the ceremony freeing herself and her children. The code gave the free, I keep messing up, biracial people and the free black people equal rights with the whites. But as the white population grew larger, white Santo Domingo discarded the convention and enslaved or sold their numerous children like any king in the African jungle. All efforts to prevent concubinage failed, and the biracial children multiplied to be freed or to remain slaves at the caprice of their fathers. Many were freed, becoming artisans and household servants. They began to amass property, and the whites, while adding increasingly to the numbers of biracial people began to restrict and harass them with malice legislation. The whites threw the whites threw as much as possible of the burdens of the country upon them. On attaining their majority, they were compelled to join the um, Marachasi, Marechaussee, a police organization for arresting fugitive black people, protecting travelers on the high road, capturing dangerous black people, fighting against the Maroons, all the difficult and dangerous tasks which the local whites might command. After 3 years of service in that word, they had to join the local militia, provide their own arms, ammunition, and account treatments. And with
Accoutrements.
what? Say again?
Accoutrements.
And without pay or allowance of any kind, served at the discretion of the white commanding officer. Okay. Such duties as the forced upkeep of the roads were made to fall on them with extra severity. They're excluded from the naval and military departments, from the practice of law, medicine, and divinity, and all public offices were places of trust. A white man could trespass on a biracial person's property, seduce his wife or daughter, insult him in any way he chose, certain that at any hint of resentment or revenge, all the whites and the government could rush out ready to lynch. A legal action, in legal action, the decision nearly always went against the biracial person, and to terrorize them into submission, a free man of color who struck a white man, whatever his station in life, was to have his right arm cut off. Jesus. But some of the fortune chance, some but by some fortunate chance, the amount of property that they could hold was not, as in the English islands, limited. Of fine physique and intelligent administrating their enterprises themselves without exhausting their fortunes in extravagant trips to Paris, they began to acquire wealth as master artisans and then as proprietors. As they began to establish themselves, the jealousy and envy of the white colonists were transformed into ferocious hatred and fear. They divided the offspring of white and black and intermediate shades into 128 divisions. The true biracial people was the child of a pure black and a pure white, the child of the white and the I keep fucking looking at the word.
Biracial woman.
I keep fucking that up. The true biracial was the child of okay, and the child of the white, and the biracial woman was a quadron with 69 parts white and 32 part black. But the quadrant could be produced by the white and the oh my god, what is that?
I wouldn't say it.
MARBOU in the proportion of 80 to 40, or by the white and the oh my gosh.
Wouldn't say that one either.
I'm gonna look these up. Let me look this up. Let me look these up.
These are all words for biracial people. And you've got one more word for biracial people sneaking up, and it's at the front of the sentence, so pay attention.
So one of them is Muslim biracial. The other one is, I forgot, another biracial. So the Marabou is the one that is Muslim biracial, and the other one I forgot. Okay, in the portion of 72 to 56, and so on, all through the 128 varieties. But the SANG-MELE within 127 white parts and one black part was still a man of color. Okay, in a slave society, the mere possession of personal freedom is a valuable privilege, and the laws of Greece and Rome testify that severe legislation against slaves and free men have nothing to do with the race question. Behind all this elaborate tomfoolery of quadran, SACATRA and MARABOU was the one dominating fact of Santo Domingo society: fear of the slaves. The mother of the biracial were in the slave gangs. They had half
So
brothers.
people,
What?
biracial people.
I did. I said biracial person.
No, you didn't say people.
Yes, I did. There is a slave gangs. They had half brothers there, and who, however much the biracial himself might despise this half of his origin, he was at home among the slaves, and in addition to his wealth and education, could have an influence among them which a white man could never have. Furthermore, apart from physical terror, the slaves were to be kept in subjection by associating inferiority and degradation with the most obvious distinguishing marks of the slave, the black skin. Few of the slaves, being able to read, the colonists did not hesitate to say openly, it is essential to maintain a great distance between those who obey and those who command. One of the surest means of doing this is the perpetuation of the imprint that slavery was once given. No biracial person, therefore, whatever his number of white parts, was allowed to assume the name of his white father. But despite this restriction, the biracial person continued to make progress. By 1755, little more than 3 generations after Black Code, they were beginning to fill the colony, and their growing numbers and riches were causing alarms to the whites. They lived, ran a report, like their forebears, on the local vegetables, drinking no wine, confining themselves to local liquor brewed from the sugarcane. Thus, their personal consumption contributed nothing to the maintenance of the important trade with France. Ooh, I need to finish up. With sober ways of living, and their small, oh my gosh, expenditures enabled them to put away most of their income every year. They accumulated immense capital and grew more arrogant as their wealth increased. They bid for all properties on sale in various districts and raised prices to such fantastic heights that the whites who were not wealthy could not buy, or ruined themselves by attempting to keep pace with them. Thus, in the same districts, the finest properties were in the possession of the half castes, and yet they were everywhere the least ready to submit to statute labor and public dues. Their plantations were the sanctuary and asylums of the free men, who had neither work nor profession, and of numerous fugitive slaves who had run away from their gangs. Being so rich, they imitated the styles of whites and sought to drown all traces of their origins. They were trying to get high commands in the militia, those who had abilities enough to make them forget the vice of their origins were even seeking places in judiciary. If this sort of thing went on, they would soon be making marriages with distinguished families, which would bind these families in alliance with the slaves in the gangs, whence the mother of this upstart came. This is no cantankerous croak from a jealous colonist. It was an official memorandum from the bureaucracy of the minister, increasing the numbers, increasing the wealth, were given the biracial people greater pride and sharpening their resentment against their humiliation. Some of them were sending their children to France to be educated. And in France, even 100 years before the revolution, there was little color prejudice. Up to 1716, every black person's slave who touched French soil was free. And after an interval of 50 years, another decree in 1762 reaffirmed this. In 1739, a slave served as trumpeter in royal regiments and carabiners. Young biracial people were received in military corps, reserved to their young nobility, and in the offices of the magistracy.
I've never heard that word. I've heard of magistry. I've never heard of magistracy.
Yeah. Let me look at this. Hold on. I'm not gonna look at it. I'm gonna look at where another stopping point is. Okay, I found one. Okay. A couple pages. We're going a little over. Sorry, everybody. Okay. They served as pages at court, yet these men had to go back to Santo Domingo and submit to the discriminations and brutality of the Santo Domingo whites. As the biracial people began to press against the barriers, white Santo Domingo passes a series of laws which for maniacal savagery are unequal. Wait, that's not unequal, is it?
It's unique, and it's San Domingo.
Unique in the modern world, and we would have said up to 1933, not likely to be parallel again in history. The Council of Port-au-Prince hold up the race question as a screen, wanted to exterminate them. Thus the whites could purge their system of a growing menace, get rid of men from whom they had borrowed money, and seize much fine property. The council proposed a banish all the half castes up to the degree
people.
Okay, to the degree of quadron of to the mountains, which they would bring into cultivation, to forbid the sales of all property on the plains to to black people, to biracial people, to deny them the right to acquiring any house property, to force all those up the degree of quadron, and all those whites who had married people of color to that degree, to sell all their slaves within a year. For, said the council, these are dangerous people, more friendly to the slaves to whom they are still attached than to us who oppress them by the subordination which we demand and the scorn with which we treat them. In the revolution, in the moment of tension, they would be the first to break the yoke which weighed on them, and more because they are richer and are now accustomed to have white debitors. Since when they no longer have sufficient respect for us. But the colonists could not carry out these sweeping plans. The biracial people, unlike the German Jewish people, were already too numerous, and the revolution would have begun there and then. The colonists had content themselves with throwing on these rivals every humiliation that ingenuity and malice could devise. Between 1758, the revolution, the persecution mounted. The biracial people were forbidden to wear swords and sabers and European dress. They were forbidden to buy ammunition. except by special permission with the exact quantity stated. They were forbidden to meet together on the pretext of weddings, feasts, or dances, under penalty of a fine for the first offense, imprisonment for the next, worse to follow. They were forbidden to stay in France. They were forbidden to play European games. The priests were forbidden to draw up any documents for them. In 1781, 8 years before the revolution, they were forbidden to take titles of Monsieur and Madame. Up to 1791, if a white man ate in their house, they could not sit at the table with him. The only privilege the whites allowed them was the privilege of lending white money. Short of insurrection, there was no way out of this. And until the Bastille fell, the efforts of the biracial, Jesus Christ, of emancipating themselves assumed strange forms.
Racial people.
De Vazesser, what?
I said biracial again. It's biracial people.
Okay. Has unearthed a story which he can understand better after Hitlerism than we could have done before. In 1771, the Seigneur Japuzet, Chapuzet, had obtained from the Council of La Cap a decree which gave him the privileges of a white man. His obscured career prevented any questions being raised about his origin. A little later, he attempted to become an officer of the militia. 4 lieutenants in the militia of the North Plain made minute researches into the records of presented an exact genealogy of the Chapuzet, I can't say it, family, proving that the maternal ancestor 150 years back was a black person from St. Kitts. De Capuzet defended himself, quote, in law and in fact, in law, because the power of deciding on the status of a citizen was prerogative of the government. What?
I was just helping you. Keep going.
Of the government and not a private individual. In fact, because in 1624, there were no black people in St. Kitts. Colonial history was now the terrain, with extracts from the historians of whites proved that there were slaves in St. Kitts in 1624. I can't say his name, admitted defeat and left for France. 3 years after he returned, calling himself M. Capuzet de Guerin, familiarly M. Guerin, aristocrat at least in name, by means of a sponsor, he again brought his case from being considered a white man before the courts. Once more he was defeated. But, oh my gosh, Capuzet was a man of resource. He claimed that his ancestor, the St. Kitts black people, was no black person, but the Carib, or born free Carib, a member of, quote, the noble race of whom the French and Spaniards had imposed the law of conquest. Capuzet triumphed. In 1779, 2 decrees of the council declared that his claims were justified, but he did not get his rank. The local officials dared not to appoint him following the publication of the decree, and the people of color abandoned themselves to such demonstrations of joy and foolishness, hopes that the consequences of Capuzet's appointment might have been very dangerous. The doors of Capuzet, I can't say his name, lawyers were besieged with quarterons, and other fair-skinned biracial people seeking to have their remote slave ancestors transformed into free and noble Caribs. All right, we're gonna look up what quadrons mean, because I don't
It's
know what that means.
it's a mixture of biracial people that were uh I forgot. They explained it earlier. It was like two whatever. Bi.
Why are you getting upset with me? I'm just gonna listen to how it sounded. That's all I'm doing. They repeated it in French, so it didn't help. I wanted to hear. I wasn't saying that you were.
Quadroons.
It's a French thing. So I didn't want to like get the definition. I wanted to hear
That's the
how it
French
was.
thing. It's a Louisiana thing.
Okay, I didn't want to like get the definition. I wanted to hear how it was sounded. I wanted to hear how they sounded it out so I could
Quadroon.
understand it. Okay, but I wanted to go and hear it. All right. All right, so we're stopping on page 58. 58. This is a hard read. 58. And it says the advantages of being white were so obvious. Okay. All right, so that's where we're stopping at. This is a hard read. It's a hard read. So, do we have anything that we want to talk about? Okay, that sounds good. All right. Well, since we're over, I'll go ahead and close out. I appreciate everybody. We'll read this again, and maybe I'll get better at it as I keep going and going and going. So, all right. Talk to you all later.